Hey, this is Rick Caselge, Head Injury Specialist from exercisesforinjuries.com. Now, in this video, what I wanted to show you is 4 different exercises to kind of target your hip flexors in order to decrease the pain in them, loosen them up, and stretch them out. Now, the first exercise ends up involving foam rolling, and I'll get Andrea to demonstrate. So you need a full-sized foam roller, and with this one, what it ends up being is like a really good hip flexor massage. And so you end up starting at just above your hip, and you end up rolling down to just above your knee, and then coming back up to your hip. And now with this one, so what we're really focusing in on is, the superficial hip flexor called rectus femoris, and we're loosening up that hip flexor called rectus femoris by doing this hip flexor massage. Now, how many repetitions and times you're going to do this one? I would start off with 5 repetitions going up and down, seeing how it ends up feeling, just perform it on one side, and then progress to 10 repetitions. And with this one ends up being good, just trying it on one side, seeing how it feels, going through a squatting movement to see if that foam rolled side is kind of looser and is moving better. So that ends up being the first exercise that you kind of need to do for your hip flexors. Now the second one ends up being a tennis ball into the hip flexors. So this is kind of like a super duper tennis ball. It's actually a dog ball that I got from the dollar store, so it ends up working really well. It's firm, and it's kind of 2 or 3 sizes bigger than a regular tennis ball. But if all you have is a regular tennis ball, go with it. If you like this exercise, it might be something that you want to check out at getting. So now we end up moving to that tennis ball into the hip. And so you're having that tennis ball in that hip area, and you're moving your body up and down, side to side, and in circles. So this ends up being a great hip flexor exercise that can end up, releasing your hip flexors, releasing that rectus femoris muscle in that hip flexor area to kind of decrease the stress, tension, and pain in the hip and in your hip flexor. So we ended up doing things in a specific order with the foam roller. We kind of worked on things in the superficial way, so working on the whole muscle in order to kind of massage that hip flexor. And then with the second one, we're really kind of targeted, releasing that hip flexor and loosening up that hip flexor in order to help when it comes to hip flexor pain. Now the third one to go through ends up being a press up. So with this one, you don't need any equipment. I'll kind of comment on the exercise before. So with this one, just like the first one, I would end up doing like 5 repetitions, getting up, just doing it on one side, seeing how that hip flexor feels. Does it feel looser? Are you able to squat easier? If that's the case, then go through it on the other side, and then you can also progress to 10 repetitions. So the foam roller and the tennis ball, you don't want to go crazy. You don't want to do 50 or 100 repetitions, because you're going to end up irritating the muscle and making it angry, and then creating more hip pain or hip flexor pain. Now the third one, now moving to the third one, no equipment. This ends up being a press up exercise. So you're lying on your stomach, hands are underneath the shoulders, and then you're going to push up and arch through the back. So you're working on the mobility in your back, but then you're also stretching the front of those hip flexors and then coming back down. So what I would end up recommending with this one is holding for like 2 or 3 seconds or even 5 seconds and seeing how it ends up feeling. Go through 2 repetitions, get up, see if that area is loosened up, see if you're able to squat better, and then you can end up progressing the length that you end up holding things. 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and just going through things with 2 repetitions. And as you saw with Andrea, when you're doing that press up movement, you want to make sure that your hips are coming off the mat so that you really end up getting a good hip flexor stretch. And with that one, what we end up doing is, just like the foam roller one, we end up kind of working more on the superficial side of things in that hip flexor. We're kind of targeting that, rectus femoris muscle. Now with the fourth one, we end up going a little bit deeper when it comes to the exercises. So the fourth one ends up being a 90-90 hip flexor stretch. So what we're doing is, the front foot's at 90, ankle, knee, and hip, and then same with this back one, hip, knee, ankle are 90 degrees. Now what you're going to do is tighten up that abdominal area. You're going to bring this arm straight up overhead, and then now you're going to bring the hips forward. Now with this exercise, what we're specifically targeting is more of that deeper hip flexor muscle called iliacus. So you'll probably feel it more in the front of your hip area here. Good. And then relaxing. And then with this one, there's a second one that we end up doing in this position in order to target psoas, which ends up being a hip flexor that's deep into the spine. So same thing, 90-90, arm overhead, hips forward, and then we're going to add a little bit of a side bend. And what you'll feel is that stretch ends up moving more deeper into that spine area. And once again, you're looking for a light stretch. Good, perfect. You're looking for a light stretch. You're not trying to rip apart the muscle, but end up going with that first one, arm overhead, hips forward, feeling it more in that iliacus area. So we end up targeting that muscle, and then move into that second one where we ended up adding that side bending in order to target that second part of that deeper hip flexor muscle. Now go with 2 repetitions on each side, holding for about 20 seconds. So there you go. That ends up being 4 exercises to do in order to help you with hip flexor pain, hip flexor tightness, in order to kind of loosen things up. If you're looking for hip flexor, a hip flexor massage exercise, a hip flexor mobility exercise, a hip flexor stretching exercise. So give those exercises a go. Make sure you do them in the order that I kind of listed them off and in the reps and set schemes that I end up recommending. You can end up doing the exercises every day, so it's perfectly fine to do the exercise every day. You just got to find that balance of how many repetitions you do. Like I said, with the foam rolling one and the tennis ball one, you want to look at the 5 to 10 repetitions. You're not looking at doing 50 repetitions. So there you go. I hope that ends up helping you with your hip pain and your hip flexor pain. Now, if you're looking for, if you like those tips and like those exercises, I have a free report for you. Just click right here and I'll end up sending it to you. And what that report is 5 more tips to help relieve tight hip flexors. In that report, I end up going through a lot of non-exercises that you can do in order to kind of loosen up your hips and kind of help with your hip pain. And I kind of talk about one that very few people highlight, especially a lot of the medical community. Now, if you're watching this on a mobile device, just head down below, hit the first link in the description, which will end up being exercisesforinjuries.com/hips. Enter in your email so I know where to send that report.